Hello everyone, welcome back to How to Dormammu. This is the second episode of my series of video tutorials for Dormammu in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. My name is Tangrowth, and in today's episode we're going to discuss Dormammu's whole kit. We're going to discuss his normals, his specials, and also his hyper combos. Dormammu has a really good kit, a really strong one, with very defined strengths and weaknesses, so I can't wait to get started. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're going to go ahead and hop right in. Alright, so normals. Dormammu has really good normals. They have really good range, so for example his standing light will hit from pretty far away. His standing medium, same deal, will hit from surprisingly far. His crouch heavy in particular has outstanding range. And his S also hits from pretty darn far away. Though not quite as much as the others. Its animation is a little deceptive there. So all of his normals are really good from range, right? But they're not as good close up. So for example, they have a bit of a whiffing problem if you're right next to the opponent. This is particularly galling in the case of someone like a Morrigan who, ostensibly is fairly tall, but she just finds a way of dodging this, especially in the corner. If you ever back a Morrigan into the corner and then go to Tri-Dasher, she can just, this can just straight up whiff. There are ranges that all of Dormammu's lights will whiff on Morrigan, and it's super frustrating. This happens with his mediums, especially in the case of crouchers. So crouchers will just dodge Dormammu's mediums from a lot of ranges. This also happens with his standing lights, but it's particularly noticeable with his mediums because of crouching medium being more of an anti-air that does not hit low. So be careful with his mediums. Because of this fact, you'll often go straight from his lights to his heavies in a lot of his chains, just because his mediums do whiff on crouchers. So, let's say I do catch this Morrigan, I can do something like this, go straight into heavy, and completely negate the issue, right? So Dormammu's mediums and heavies are all outstanding, despite the fact that they have a little bit of a whiffing problem. This whiffing problem is not present on his heavies and S's. They will hit most of the time, as long as your timing is true. And they're extremely strong for that purpose, so I won't go into frame data, that stuff's all available on the wiki, but just know that his lights are a little bit slow, his mediums are normal speed, and his heavies are on the slower side. Dormammu's a slower character, so none of his moves are really mashable in that way. Just keep that in mind when you're playing him. So another thing that we absolutely have to mention is the fact that all of Dormammu's normals, with the exception of his lights, nullify projectiles. So his mediums do it, his heavies do it, and his S's do it, both jumping, crouching, and standing. All of them. So this is obviously extremely strong in a game with as many projectiles as Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So, let's say this Morrigan is throwing Soul Fists at me. I can kind of just swat them out of the air as long as my timing is true. Now, obviously this is kind of a dangerous strategy. You can think of it as kind of akin to parries in Street Fighter, right? If you time it right, you're going to eat full damage of a counter hit, but it's extremely strong, and it allows you to completely disengage with some chip strategies, and they also will nullify all projectiles that they come in contact with, as opposed to just a single one. So obviously this is extremely strong. When combined with the fact that Dormammu has a full screen beam super, it leads to him having some extremely strong presence in projectile wars, even though his own main full screen option in Dark Matter only has one durability. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Dark Matter has one durability, remember that. And remember that if you're trying to win durability wars, your best bet is usually something with spells. His spells have insane durability, or Dark Hole or Pillar. But we're talking about normals, so for the moment, let's talk about the use cases for some of his normals. So Dormammu's standing normals are mostly good as anti-airs. They're really good for catching opponents coming at you, like jumping, catching people out of a teleport, like a Dante teleport. You can often just swat at them with with stand medium. Stand medium will also often catch people jumping at you. It's very good for that purpose. It's relatively fast. I believe it's 8 or 9 frames on startup, so pretty darn good for just catching people coming at you with a JH or something. And chains directly into his S. His S is pretty safe as long as you catch the opponent on the ground. It can be chicken blocked and punished, but because of its pretty good pushback on block, even if they don't push block you, it's pretty safe. So, obviously with push block you're incredibly safe, but even with push block off, it's surprisingly difficult to punish. I think Morrigan can catch me there if she's mashing to L. because it's a 4-framer, but it's pretty safe. So don't be afraid to throw out his stand S in neutral. Don't be afraid to throw out mediums. His heavies are a little bit tougher to use. The best one is 2H anti-air, but let's be real, your Dormammu, a lot of the time you're going to be in the air. And in the air, Dormammu's normals are all absolutely outstanding. You can kind of just throw them out, get really used to tri-dashing around with him because it's extremely strong. So that's a crossover and an overhead using his tri-dash JH. You can also do the same thing with tri-dash JS. The biggest difference between JH and JS is that JS is, they have slightly different timings to them, and JS juggles the opponent a little bit lower, and JH juggles them a little bit higher. So, you know, depending on which one you want for a particular confirm, you might go for one or the other. So just for a quick demonstration of that, for example, I can do something like this. You see they got juggled quite high there. But if I then restart, you can see if I do JS, they fall significantly faster. So use that to your advantage. JH and JS are fairly similar moves with fairly similar arcs. They both nullify projectiles. They're both extremely strong for use off tri-dash in the air. But you don't always want to be super jump tri-dashing. His normal jump tri-dash is significantly faster. And as we discussed in the previous episode about movement, if you are moving around with Dormammu, you usually want to use a whiffed normal, or, you know, obviously a normal that hits, in order to maintain the speed on his tri-dashes, because if you don't, they just don't move quite as fast. So it's not as noticeable as with some characters like a Dr. Doom, who just sort of like stalls in the air. But Dormammu will, you know, for example, if you're doing something like that, it's a really noticeable drop-off, whereas if I do that, I fall a lot faster. So you're a lot safer in the latter case, so always whip a normal if you're tri-dashing around with Dormammu. The best normal for that purpose is usually JL, so like for example that's an extremely fast overhead, but it whiffs on a lot of characters unless you're super jumping. And JH or JS off super jump are extremely strong. Lastly, JM is very strong too. My best use case for JM is probably like off a falling teleport, especially with an assist. That's an overhead that's surprisingly active. You know, so if the opponent, maybe they're jumping, or maybe you're up here and you do JM on the way down, just really, really good. Projectile nullifying, overhead, falling hitbox. You know, it's almost like a Helm Breaker. It's super strong. Obviously not quite as much hit stun though. Alright, command normals. Dormammu's got 2 of them, and they're both extremely strong and integral parts of his kit. First, we're going to talk about Dark Matter. So Dark Matter is performed with forward heavy. It is a full screen, fixed hit stun, wall bouncing, single hit projectile with 1 point of projectile durability. So you can tell from that it has extremely defined strengths and weaknesses. Fixed hit stun wall bounce obviously is extremely nice. That means that depending on your timing, you can link it into itself even from full screen. So you can do something like this. As long as you catch the opponent decently high with it, you can always do that. Additionally, you can use it as a combo, you know, extender to carry the opponent to the corner. You can use it as a combo starter combined with his teleports. And depending on your timing, you know, that's an instant 50-50 that you can turn into a full combo. So, extremely strong tool, obviously, for a variety of purposes. Dark Matter has some very defined weaknesses, though. So the main one that you're going to run into is you can't really use it in projectile wars. So, you know, let's say the opponent's throwing Soul Fists at you. Even 2 Dark Matters will lose. It'll maintain its animation, but it's not there anymore. It's a ghost. It has 1 exact point of projectile durability, so it loses to everything, even like a round trip from Virgil. And just, yeah, it's kind of useless for that purpose. That said, it also is extremely hard to use against certain characters because they can just crouch under it. This is most notable in the case of, obviously, Morrigan, but there's a handful of others who can do it, like Wolverine, I believe can, Rocket Raccoon. If you ever want a full list, I recommend checking out Spartan Throne's chart, which I will also post in the description of this video. So, Dark Matter is very useful, but it also has some particular drawbacks. If the opponent, manages to dodge your dark matter, you're kind of a sitting duck because it has a decent amount of recovery. But if you can force them to block it, it's fairly safe. Additionally, obviously, if you hit them with it, it's a great combo starter. You can basically combine it with a teleport to get a... And it scales not at all because it's a single hit, so you can combine that with a teleport and, really catch the opponent slipping. The really strong thing about Dark Matter is the fact that you can cancel it into its teleport. So this is an instant 50-50 from anywhere on screen. And additionally, because of that, just the threat of the teleport means that if you hit them with it a couple times, you'll often find them just blocking a Dark Matter with their face. And then if you get really good at reading their blocks, you can do that and then confirm into like a Dark Hole, Teleport, X Factor, or something like that, So you'll see really, really strong Dormammus like your Spartan Thrones do stuff like this. A little bit tricky to pull off. So, if you've already done even a teeny bit of chip in this matchup, then that's usually enough to secure you a kill. And that's the thing to really understand with Dormammu, is that a lot of his damage comes indirectly, right? So a lot of things, one of the things that I think a lot of new Dormammu struggle with is they're like, oh, well, I only know how to do MMHS and I can't kill off one touch. Well, that's okay, because you're a death by 1,000 cuts type of character. So, keep that in mind. Dormammu's kind of paradoxical in that his damage is simultaneously really high and really low when you're first starting out with him. Once you understand how to use his spells in neutral and in combos, his damage becomes really high all the time. But that does take time, and in the meantime, don't be afraid to win by indirect damage. So, anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. We're going to move on to Dormammu's other command normal, which is Flame Carpet. So, Flame Carpet is extremely strong, obviously. It is probably Dormammu's single most iconic and strongest move. It's got a variety of use cases that are really, really, really different. So, for example, one of my favorite uses for Flame Carpet, obviously, is in neutral. You can just lay one down, and now the opponent cannot approach you on the ground. Now, this has the corollary that if you put down a Flame Carpet, they're going to try to approach you in the air. That's when you catch them with like a JM or a stand medium. However, this is all predicated on them not having a way to hit you over the Flame Carpet, and that's not always a sure thing. So, for example, let's say this Morrigan is throwing Soul Fists at me and I throw it on a Flame Carpet. Yeah, it'll eat one of them, but the other one might hit me. And then my Flame Carpet goes away. So, you have to be careful with it. If the opponent has ways to hit you over Flame Carpet, then they will reliably do it and punish you. It's a sometimes food. Here's some of those sometimes. So it's really good as a block string. This 2L 3H block string is incredibly strong. It's +4 on block. You can do it in the corner or mid-screen. In the corner, it's an incredibly strong tool. Okay, let's take a second and talk about something there. So, Dormammu normally can only have one Flame Carpet, and if you try to do another one while it's out, you'll only get 2H for a while afterward. However, there's a glitch. If you cancel a blocked normal into a Flame Carpet, you can have as many a time as you want and completely ignore the cooldown. So that's actually why this block string is so strong. It's exploiting a glitch. Depending on your timing and your placement, you can do something like this and have multiple Flame Carpets on the screen at a time. This is obviously extremely hard to deal with for the opponent, as this move was balanced around only having one on the screen at a time. And depending on your exact placement, you can sometimes do some shenanigans like this. So I just hit them with Flame Carpet from both sides at the same time. Incredibly strong, incredibly dirty stuff from Dormammu. Flame Carpet is an OTG, low-hitting, lingering projectile. It lasts for 3 full seconds, 180 frames. So because of that, you can do some incredibly nasty stuff with it. It's particularly notable on incoming. There's a player called Jason Kiddo who popularized this setup, which consists of basically you kill the opponent with a Stalking Flare and a Flame Carpet. You force them to block you know, and then if they either get hit by the flame carpet there because they're not blocking low, they get hit by my jumping heavy because they are blocking low, or they eat the stalking flare and then, you know, you hit them with something like a pipe or an up arrows. So that's an inescapable setup. That's set play. That is Dormammu's main strength, and the thing that enables that for the most part is flame carpet. Stalking flare on its own would not be enough to make that setup happen. The lingering, low-hitting, stationary projectile of flame carpet is just as important, right? So keep that in mind. Flame carpet used properly is probably Dormammu's defining move. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about Dormammu's specials. First one is the Dark Hole, quarter circle forward. So Dark Hole is extremely strong. It's one of Dormammu's most iconic moves. It's a huge stationary projectile that summons at one of 3 different distances depending on which button you press. It has a total of 30 durability and its beam durability. It advances him ever so slightly imperceptibly forward as you do it. So that if I do this long enough, see, she actually gets hit by it. And it's really strong if you do it as a TK because then he recovers a little bit faster. But Dark Hole is really good for zoning. So for example, you know, if I have this Morrigan here, and let's say I set her up to, you know, be throwing some Soul Fists at me. And if I have her doing that and I have Dark Holes on the screen, you know, those Soul Fists become slightly less of a problem. It's not perfect. As you can see, Dormammu can still get hit by the one on the second Soul Fist. He can still get hit by ones coming from behind. But, you know, for other projectiles like a Plasma Beam, it's very strong. Additionally, Dark Hole is really good as a combo extender. So even at high hit stun where Pillar might not work, you can usually get a Dark Hole extension. So you can usually do something like this. Really solid combo that works even at high hit stun. Dark Hole does not have fixed hit stun technically, but effectively it does on all except the last hit. So it'll always combo into itself even at max hit stun. Very, very useful and builds a ton of meter. Additionally, Dark Hole can be confirmed even at full screen into Chaotic Flame. So, you know, if you just throw it out and you catch the opponent pressing a button, you can confirm that into Chaotic Flame, turn that into a full combo with X Factor. Just a super strong tool that is absolutely worth using and worth your time. Alright, the next of Dormammu's special moves that we're going to discuss is the Pillar. So, Pillar is extremely strong. Like Dark Hole, it gets summoned in one of 3 different distances, depending on where you execute it. It's performed with a Dragon Punch motion, forward, down, down, forward. Pillar is extremely strong, but it is very situational like Dark Hole. It has 15 points of overall durability, making it on the higher end for projectiles. That's half of Dark Hole's 30. And it has beam durability like Dark Hole, so you'll find it'll nullify a lot of other projectiles. However, it is vulnerable to people plinking right past it on the ground because it's a little bit slow and it is completely stationary. So, you know, if you throw out a heavy pillar, throw out a bunch of these while they're in the air, sure, but as soon as they hit the ground, they're often going to be able to plink right past it, right at you. And it's very easy to punish if it whiffs. So you do have to be a little bit careful with pillar. But if you are, it's really, really good. You know, so if they're mashing and you catch them mashing a couple times with it, you can do incredibly high damage. Even if they block, you know, if they, for whatever reason, choose not to push block, for example, you can still do incredible damage with it. So here he's push blocking, right? Negates a lot of the chip. But if he's not, that chip adds up quick. You know, you combine that with spells, you combine that with like a Stalking Flare. Pillar's really, really strong as a neutral tool, as a chip tool, as an indirect damage tool. Like, look at that, I just did a third of their life without ever touching them. One of the best things you can do when you're getting rushed down with Dormammu is just throw out a light pillar and do a ball. This is a great neutral reset. If they're jumping at you, the pillar will catch them. If they're on the air and plinking at you, the pillar will catch them. Even if it trades with like a light or something, pillar still comes out. And then, you know, you might lose the stalking flare, but you still get the pillar. Really, really good combination that has absolutely bailed me out a million times. So, yeah, use pillar. Opt towards heavy pillar only when you're 100% confident that it'll hit. Otherwise, medium pillar and light pillar are significantly safer because they're harder to avoid and still hit Dormammu. You know, it is worth mentioning that pillar is Dormammu's main OTG. You use pillar into Chaotic Flame a lot. However, at absolutely max hit stun, that will whiff. So you do have to be a little bit careful with it. Alright, so the next of Dormammu's special moves, which we're going to discuss, is his teleport. So, as you might have guessed from the previous mentions, this is an incredibly important move for Dormammu. His teleport is relatively safe compared to other teleports like Virgil or like a Rocket Raccoon, because his teleports him in the air. Dormammu's teleport puts him in the air just out of range of someone, you know, trying to grab him from the ground, and additionally he has 3 different teleports that teleport him in slightly different places. His light teleport teleports him significantly in front of the opponent. Heavy teleport puts him just in above the opponent. And medium teleport actually puts him behind, even in the corner. So if you have the opponent all the way in the corner, you can still steal it with medium teleport. This is incredibly strong and actually sets him apart from certain characters like Jean Grey or Doctor Strange, who, despite having teleports, completely lack the ability to steal the corner. So use this to your advantage. Dormammu's teleport is an extremely strong tool. However, it does have certain limitations. So, for example, there is a limited number of teleports that you can do in the air at one time because of the air action limit, right? You can only do 3, which leads you to only have 4 at a time if you count the one that you do off the ground. But let's be honest, you very rarely need that many teleports. You know, usually you're doing something like that to sort of catch the opponent slipping with just a single left-right. And that's enough, you know? The only time I do anything more than that is usually involving like a stalking flare and doing something like that, right? But that's rare, and most of the time if you're teleporting, like, you're just doing something like this. Additionally, though Dormammu's teleports track to the opponent, it's very important to note that they're not exclusively an offensive tool. One of his most powerful escapes when the opponent is rushing him down is to teleport and then fly away. This gives Dormammu very strong escape options that he would normally lack. Lastly, I believe I discussed this in the previous episode, but he has a 4th sort of spicy teleport, which is Liberation, quarter circle, back, and heavy used in the air. This teleports him down to the ground immediately, and if you have meter, you can do, you know, let's say they're chasing you on the ground, they're trying to get at me, I do something like this. Blow them up with Chaotic Flame. Super strong strategy, and if you think they might be blocking, maybe you go for a Stalking Flare there or whatever. The point, and if you have Spells Pact, you also get Spells Release, which brings us to Dorm's final and arguably strongest and most important special move, his spells. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about Dormammu's spells, right? Spells are really good. Spells are probably his best special move, if taken collectively. There are a variety of specials all contained within this one that enable him to really effectively zone and control space. They give him tools that are otherwise completely lacking from his kit, and generally really just kind of put him over the top from being, you know, sort of a mid-tier zoner into being a real threat. So let's talk about spells in the simplest terms possible, because I feel like while spells are really good and there's a really steep learning curve in terms of them having a high ceiling, we can boil it down to there being 3 really, really good spells, which are 3 red, 2 blue, 1 red, and 2 red, 1 blue. Right, so we're going to talk about those 3 in detail, but all of Dormammu's single spell, 2 spell varieties do have unique use cases, And if you want a single sentence blurb for how to use them, mostly use 1 red and 1 blue, or 2 red, as both of those are pretty useful. But we're going to start with a discussion of 3 red, the explosion, the jump scare. So Dormammu's 3 red is extremely strong. It's a huge explosion that OTGs, it hits Happy Birthday, and you can combo off of it fairly easily in a variety of situations. So the simplest way is just with Dark Hole into Chaotic Flame. Depending on your timing, if you're especially godlike, you can do something like this. I'm apparently not especially godlike. So, easy dead Magneto off of the explosion. And you'll catch people slipping with the explosion. If you're good at gathering spells in neutral, you'll be able to catch 3 red and get them from mid-screen or farther all the time. You do have to be close about using 3 red when they're really close up, as it lacks a certain strength, which his other 3 spell varieties that we'll be discussing have. This one and this one are different in a very subtle way, but one that becomes apparent quickly when you're playing Dormammu, which is that this one can get snuffed. So yeah, let's move on to a discussion of one that can't get snuffed, and what I mean when I say that. Alright, so next up is 1 red, 2 blue. Oh god, I'm so sick of referring to these specials this way. What's the actual name for this move? Anyway, next up is 1 red, 2 blue. So 1 red, 2 blue is really, really strong in a variety of situations. It has really great durability, really great damage, huge meter gain, especially if you manage to catch the opponent with it at super jump height. So, you know, if something like that, that just built me half a bar, did 200k, and put the opponent into a hard knockdown, because it always does that against airborne opponents. 2 blue, 1 red is incredibly strong in a variety of situations. As long as you don't mess up your TK when you're putting it out. Oh, wrong one. TKs are also incredibly strong for using spells in general off of like an S, but you can get them off in a variety of ways. And with 2 blue, 1 red, one of the strongest uses is to just use it to OTG, get a lot of extra damage, a lot of extra meter onto a basic combo. You can use it to make yourself safe a lot. If someone's rushing you down, you can just throw it out. And I mentioned a little bit ago how it will keep you safe in a variety of situations. Well, here's, how it won't get snuffed, rather. Here's what I meant by that. So, you know, let's say we got a Spencer who's coming at us with Bionic Arm, as Spencer is wont to do. Then maybe we've got something actually preloaded, right? So, notice that there is I put the spell out after the Super Flash. I got hit the same frame that I put it out, and it still came out. This is why I say that Meteors and Inferno come out frame 0, because even if Dorm is hit on the same frame that you finish executing the motion and press the button, they'll still come out. And this is particularly notable in the case of Inferno, right? So if we have Inferno preloaded and Spencer comes at us with the Bionic Arm, that was incredible, right? It still did that. So, you know, let's say Spencer's coming at us with the Bionic Arm, but it's all the way in the corner, right? You know, that kept me safe, because he wouldn't have been able to do a follow-up there. This is really, really strong if someone's trying to rush you down, like a Spencer, like a Virgil. It's kind of an extreme... It's the closest thing Dorm has to a true reversal, right? It's basically this and level 3. So for that reason, his 3 spell varieties which come out on frame 0, which to be clear are these two. 2 red, 1 blue, and 2 blue, 1 red, are incredibly strong for his neutral and incredibly important tools in his arsenal. I can't tell you how many times someone's been rushing me down and gotten the hit, and I just mashed out spells the same frame, and I just won the trade because Inferno is insane. So 2 blue, 1 red to review is very useful as a screen clear. It's very useful as a huge dump of durability that is very difficult to get through, and it's most useful on incoming. So, like for example, with my team with Cast Storm Doom, I might do something like this. Alright, so let's say I got the kill. I could do this. That's a fairly safe way to get my point back in on incoming, right? And another good use case for the big meteors is if the opponent is up at super jump height for some reason, and you can catch them with it. You know, maybe they're approaching you that way. So it's really good in combination with Flame Carpet to catch people who are approaching you in the air. Same also goes for Inferno, which is very strong for that purpose as well. So use Big Meteors and use Inferno as your primary goals when you're gathering spells, right? For this reason, I feel like there is an optimal order to gather spells in, which is basically that because the 1 red varieties are better than the 1 blue varieties, because the 3 red variety is better than the 3 blue variety, and because all of his best spells require at least 1 red hand, if you have 0 spells, I feel like you should always gather 1 red. Once you have 1 red, you do have to at least have your final spell goal in mind, because, you know, if you gather 2 red, you're locked out of 2 blue, 1 red. If you gather 2 red, then your best bet is usually to gather 1 blue and have Inferno packed. But, you know, if you're really feeling yourself, sometimes you'll pull out the jump scare. In general, though, the safest option is always Inferno. So, we're going to talk a little bit about Dormammu's supers. He's got 3 of them, and they're all really good. Chaotic Flame is number 1, obviously. It's a huge full-screen beam super that does tremendous damage, even at max scaling. At minimum scaling, but with maximum mashing, it does about 330, and then at maximum scaling, it does about 240. Incredibly high damage. It hits full screen, he can combo off of it from Dark Hole, he can X-Factor and do it again most of the time. Super duper strong tool in his arsenal. Like, that just did like 60% for level 1 X Factor. Absolutely crazy tool. Chaotic Flame is really strong for Dorm in a variety of situations. If the opponent is approaching you on the ground, it's a really good full screen check, especially because he can confirm off of it from anywhere on screen. Additionally, if the opponent is not quite at full screen, but like half screen or farther, it's still pretty safe. If the opponent is closer than that, they can block it. Its hitbox ends significantly before its animation ends. So if you chicken guard it, for example, if you push block it correctly, you can just like hit him with a stinger or something like that, dash up light. So it is very, very punishable. So you do have to have a safe DHC if you're gonna just throw it out willy-nilly in neutral. But if you do, boy, is it strong to be able to just do that. I can't tell you how many games that right there is won for me. Just hearing an assist call and then boom. Oh, it's such a good feeling. Chaotic Flame will win you a variety of interactions against other supers in the game. So for example, if the opponent is a Virgil and they put up swords or Devil Trigger, you can punish with Chaotic Flame. If the opponent is a Spencer and they're full screen and they Bionic Arm you, you can punish with Chaotic Flame, but if they're closer than like about mid-screen, it will hit. Dr. Doom going for any of his supers, you can punish with Chaotic Flame, as long as you're not already in block stun. It has something like 3 or 4 frames of startup after the flash, so it's incredibly fast, especially on DHC. But even on point, it's very fast as supers go, and so the one thing you do have to be aware of is that if you put out Chaotic Flame point blank, the opponent can react after the flash with Snapback, and that will always win. So don't do it in range of the opponent's snap, and you'll mostly be safe. Dormammu's other level 1 super is Quarter Circle Back, Stalking Flare. Stalking Flare is less damaging than Chaotic Flame, though still very highly damaging in its own right. But its main utility is that it is an extremely effective combo extender at high hit stun, and it is arguably the best set play tool in the entire game. So when you watch a player like a Jason Kiddo play Dormammu, you'll see them route their combos in such a way that they almost always end in Stalking Flare. This allows him to do the famous Jason Kiddo setup, which consists of a flame carpet on the ground and a Stalking Flare forcing the opponent into block stun. If he does it perfectly, it allows him to deliver an inescapable, unblockable hit. This is, obviously incredibly strong, especially since with Dormammu's high damage, it allows him to kill off of it most of the time. So, Stalking Flare is just as good as Chaotic Flame, but what it lacks in damage, it absolutely makes up for in utility. A lot of the time, when you're in neutral, you might want to just throw out a Stalking Flare as a sort of way to reset things. So when you throw out that Stalking Flare, that might allow you to, get some space and get away from the opponent. It forces them to play around it because it does not go away unless Storm is hit or forced to tech a grab, or it hits the opponent 20 times. So Stalking Flare is really, really strong. It's arguably stronger than Chaotic Flame as a single bar in neutral, unless you're absolutely sure Chaotic Flame will hit. If you think it might be blocked, Stalking Flare is usually safer. Now, that said, you can't just throw it out raw. There are a lot of supers that'll beat it. It's fairly slow. I believe it's like 16 frames or something like that after the flash. So as a result, you need the opponent to be occupied, in block stun, in hit stun, something like that when you throw out Stalking Flare, in order to be unable to punish you. A lot of the time they can even just call a beam assist, so if they even have that available, you can't get out Stalking Flare safely. But as long as you're aware of its limitations, it is arguably his single strongest tool in neutral. So use Stalking Flare, use it to reset things, slow things down, and get things back to your pace. Think about it this way, even if it's completely blocked, a Stalking Flare is still enough time for you to set up at least 2 spells every single time, and that alone is worth a meter. 2 spells is very close to 3 spells, 3 spells is half a bar, and that's how you get the Dormammu, control vortex going, where you just have endless meter, endless spells, and endless Stalking Flares on the screen. It's incredibly strong, and he only needs 2 meters to get it started. Last but not least, Dormammu's level 3 is Dark Dimension. Perform with a Dragon Punch motion and 2 buttons. Dark Dimension is very strong, but it is somewhat limited in its utility. It's the closest thing that Dormammu has to a true reversal that doesn't cost spells, but obviously with a 3 meter cost, it's still fairly pricey. It's very good in a variety of situations, so for example, if the Spencer here comes at me with Bionic Arm, someone has set my buttons wrong, it's my darn husband, how dare he play on my setup. But let's say the Spencer comes at me with a Bionic Arm, and I want to try to catch him out. I can do something like this. Okay, hang on. Alright, so I'm putting this in after the flash, and I just win. It has an incredibly high number of iframes. I believe it's something like 36 iframes. So it beats every other reversal super in the game for the most part. However, it does have some idiosyncrasies. So for example, it'll lose to other projectile supers because it has relatively low durability. So if the opponent throws out a Vishanti or a Chaotic Flame, you won't be able to punish with level 3 if you're not right next to them, because it'll creep onto the screen and get nullified by their projectile instead. So level 3 is incredibly useful, incredibly strong, but combined with the fact that it only hits on the ground and thus can be jumped, you know, it is kind of limited in its utility, but boy, if you know how to use it, it's so good. You know, I can't tell you how many times I caught a Spencer bionic arming at me, I caught a Virgil putting up swords, I caught a Doom throwing finger lasers even from full screen. Dark Dimension is really strong. There's also the fact that you can get one spell both before and after Dark Dimensions, so if you have one spell going in, you can always do this little combo. So that kills almost everyone important in the cast, even more so if you have X Factor, and I could have optimized that further. So, you know, keep that in mind. Dark Dimension is worth the meter spend if it'll connect most of the time. And it also is very useful because it can connect even at max hit stun at times that Pillar Flame wouldn't. Last but not least, do keep in mind with Dark Dimension that if you put it out directly after an MMHS sequence, it will whiff because the opponent is considered airborne for a moment after hitting the ground. So for this, among many other reasons, it is always optimal to gather exactly one spell before you output Dark Dimension. Always, always, always. It doesn't matter. Like, unless you land super duper late, you do learn to find the timing of this stuff. But, you know, maybe I do something like this. You know, you can do various frame kills there, but for a variety of reasons, it's usually best to just gather one spell. It's always better to have one spell than 0 spells. It's always better to have 2 spells than 1 spell, etc. So, you know, when you're using Dorms level 3, keep in mind, you can gather one spell on either side of it, and you'll have a much better time. This has been an overview of Dormammu's entire kit in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. Dormammu is an extremely strong character who has a variety of tools which can be used, and this is kind of only scratching the surface. However, hopefully this has given you an idea of what he can do in a variety of situations. For more insight into how Dormammu plays, watch how I play, watch how better Dormammus than me play, watch Spartan Throne, watch Jason Kiddo, watch Dormammus of the past like Angelic, F-Champ, watch Dormammus of the future like Ace's Return, Mech Warrior has a pretty good Dormammu. There's a variety of really good people playing this character, Spiral, Idom, and all of them are worth stealing tech from. So whatever your team, and next episode is going to be about how to build the perfect Dormammu team, just know that this is a character who's good enough to win in pretty much any position and at pretty much any amount of life. As long as he has resources and or X, Dormammu can win you the game. So next time around, we're going to talk about team building and how to build the perfect Dormammu team. So don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Tangrowth, and this has been How to Dormammu Part 2. Bye bye.